I remember the night of April 2nd of 2010. April 2nd was the day the on-call neurosurgeon informed my family that my cousin would be disabled from the waist down forever. The accident occurred around midnight, and then my family and I went to the hospital around 12:30 in the morning. The major distress was that the police mentioned that the other driver was intoxicated. It broke my heart to even imagine what this experience was like for my cousin. My cousin Josh was just coming home from a night shift. He pulled an overtime shift just so he could earn some more money for his little sisters. I still remember the night quite vividly. My parents and I rushed to the hospital in Ann Arbor. His parents live in Chicago and were not able to come till the next morning since it was a 5.5 hour drive. I was only 13 years old at the time, and it had boggled my mind how my cousin was the one suffering for someone else's wrongdoing. The police had stated that the drunk driver did not have any major injuries except for a small cut or a laceration around his arm, but he was lucky that it missed his brachial artery. At the time, I was very angry, and I wandered around the hospital and then found a chapel. When I entered the chapel, I started praying and asked God, why is this happening? What did my cousin do to receive this? I remember bursting out crying. I heard a knock on the door, and a young resident then came in. We talked for about 10 minutes, and she shared a familiar experience. I took this very deeply. This resident did not know me, but she decided to share her whole biggest secret with me. After she hugged me and then took me to my family, and she told my family that they have a really good son. This was the toughest time for my family, hands down. We really had no idea what was going on with my cousin. No one really cared to update us while Josh was fighting for his life on the operation table. I figured this was normal in a hospital since doctors were so busy saving lives. After waiting for about an hour, the young resident then came and updated us, and she apologized saying that it was a complicated case and she feels bad that no one came to update us. My mind was all over the place, thinking about the absolute worst case scenarios possible. My cousin was on the table for about 8 hours, and the resident ended up coming every single hour just to update my family and I. Finally, after 8 hours of waiting, both the surgeons came out and asked for Josh's guardians. Josh is well over the age of 21, but my parents told him that they were the godparents for him. And they discussed the whole situation about his family coming in the next morning because of the 5.5 hour drive. After everything was clarified, the doctors asked to take my parents into a conference room to discuss what was going on with my cousin. They did not allow me to come because they thought I was too young and I would not be able to understand the terminology. I waited close to 40 minutes to see my favorite cousin. After those 40 minutes, my parents told me that my cousin actually severed his cervical spine from C1 to C4. The doctor stated that this herniation was fused and done with the micro decompression. This was a long procedure of putting rods and 8 screws to fix the curvature of the spine. They stated firmly it would take close to 3 years for a full recovery for my cousin. This was very upsetting news for my family. Josh had just recently been accepted into a medical school, one of the top medical schools in the U.S. He was planning on surprising his family during Easter weekend just to tell them the good news. Josh had a great future lined up for him. As the years went on, I saw my cousin crying, fighting, and screaming for every single step, but there's progress. He was a born fighter. Looking back as a 13-year-old, I thought that the doctors and staff had no sympathy for my cousin or for my family, but I was absolutely wrong. The ultimate goal was to better the patients' lives no matter what the condition or cost was. I was dazzled by the idea of medicine. This experience shaped me in the person I have become today. The young resident reinforced my desire to become a strong and sympathetic physician who gives back to his local community, and this is why I've decided to encompass the career path of medicine.